theology because Paul said that it's not in your bank account. It's not in where you work or where you went to school. But Paul says it's in him that we live, move, and have our being. That the only way you were able to walk in here today is because God had been keeping you. I wish I had somebody here that knows it ain't your mama that kept you. It ain't your friend that kept you. That it been the Lord, that it been in him that you live, move, and have your being. Yeah. God wanted David to understand that it was him that was keeping him. Let's look at several lessons, lest I hold you too long, that God wanted David to discover about how God had kept him. First thing God wanted David to understand is that he had been miraculously sustained. He had been miraculously sustained. And the way God wanted David to see that, God wanted David to recognize the distance that he had traveled. He wanted him to recognize the distance that he had traveled. In verse 8, God says, I took thee from tending to the sheep to tending to my people. When you look at verses 8, 9, and 10, I hope you didn't close your book. God said, David, look. He says, I did this. In verse 8, he said, I took thee. In verse 9, he says, I was with thee. In verse 10, he said, I will appoint thee. God wanted David to know that I am the one that did for you what you couldn't do for yourself. Boy, I hope y'all ain't going to sleep on me already. But I wish somebody can give God a praise right there, that you know that it's true about your life, that God says wherever you are, God wanted me to remind you I did. Look at your neighbor and tell them God did it. Come on, look at somebody and tell them God did it. Come on, tell them everything I know God told me, everything I got God gave me, and where I'm going, God is going to take me. Somebody ought to give him a hand clap of praise if you know that it ain't been nobody. But God says, I did it. God says, I did it. And every now and then we need to remember that it ain't been nobody but God. I know you think you all that. I know you think you the biggest, baddest brother on the block. I know you think that you all that. But listen, it ain't whoever you are and whatever you got, the Lord did it. He says, I took thee. I took thee. He wanted David to recognize the distance he had traveled, and he wanted David to know that, listen, David, I have not just brought you some of the way, but God wanted David to know I brought you all the way. That God doesn't do anything in part, but he wanted David to know that I brought you all the way. Let me say it one more time. God said, David, I brought you all the way. Every now and then, Shalom, it's good to look back over your life and see how far the Lord has brought you. Oh, y'all still ain't feeling me. You haven't always been doing as well as you're doing right now. I wish I had somebody that can holler back at me that you know you haven't always lived as well as you're living right now. Every now and then we need to look back over our lives and see how far God has brought us. Tell somebody I ain't always been able to drive what I'm driving now. I ain't always lived like I'm living right now. Matter of fact, now is a good time to lift your hand and say, Lord, I thank you because I ain't always had it like I got it. Truth of the matter is, I'm going to keep it real. You're going to keep it real with me. That some of us are driving some cars that our credit says we shouldn't be driving. Some of us are living in some houses that our credit says that we shouldn't be living in. Somebody ought to holler back at me if you know that it ain't been nobody but God wanted David to understand the distance he had traveled. But then also, point 1b is that he also wanted David to understand the difficulty that had been transcended. It's in verse 9. God says, and I cut off not some. Y'all ain't in here with me. But I cut off all your enemies. Let me drop this on you. That where you made it to, there were some folk in your life that didn't want to see you get where you got. Boy, y'all ain't feeling me. I would, everybody that shout with you ain't happy for you. But God didn't let them keep you from getting where God got you to. Boy, y'all ought to holler back at me up in here if you ever experienced God cutting off all. Look at somebody and say, he cut them all off. Not some of them, but he cut them all. That's why when folk try to get in your way and they try to keep you from getting where God is taking you to, you ain't got to cuss them out. You ain't got to fight with nobody. All you got to do is just stand still and let the Lord fight your battle. Is there anybody here know that he will? He'll fight your battle. He'll fight your battle. He said, I cut off not some, but I cut off all your enemy. When I was growing up, when I was coming up, whenever we did something that we didn't, that folk didn't want to see us do, whenever we were able to do it, we'd look back at them and say, nah. Boy, y'all ain't hearing me. Y'all don't mind going back old school to me. Every now and then there's some folk in your life that you need to look back at. Matter of fact, when you go home today, call them up and just say, nah. It wasn't no. I ain't come to be heavy, y'all, just helpful. Give me a moment. I'm making out a list of folk that I'm going to call soon I get home. Give me a moment. It's going to be a long exercise. Here it is. But watch this now. Not only did God want David to understand in God keeping him, that God had not only allowed him to able to see the distance that he had traveled, the difficulty that